Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Evolved Man Masterclass. Today, I'm super excited to have with me a friend and guest, Brandon Peele. How's it going, Brandon?
It's going good, Ben. Good to be with you.
It's good to have you, Brandon. Brandon, I'll introduce you as a writer, a purpose guide. You're a teacher of courses. Can you expand a little bit on your bio and all the cool things that you're up to?
Yeah. So, the short way of saying is like, I like to consider myself like disrupting every sector of society, from religion to education to business, meaning that so much of our expression on this planet is not evolved. It's not purposeful. We're making the world worse. And that begins by people finding their purpose. So I teach classes on that. I've got a book coming out. I had a book coming out that came out last year on that called Purpose Rising. And yeah, I'm just committed to people finding their purpose. And I've been doing this work for about 5 years now.
All right. Awesome. So let's go into your backstory, because you've got a fascinating evolution. It's a great story. I think it could make a great movie one day. But tell us a little bit about your backstory and how you've evolved, and we can dive into different pieces of it.
Yeah. Well, I'll share it a little bit for this evolved perspective, because I think it's important. Like all American kids, I was wild and creative and fun, and I had emotions and all this kind of stuff. And growing up in Chicago, there's a very kind of narrow bandwidth for like what's acceptable as a man.
Right.
And so, I remember getting into fights for being creative. Like I was called a fag and all this kind of stuff, and just because I loved art. And so eventually the bastards wore me down, and I ended up becoming like a Stifler jock, swimming and throwing shot put discus and all that kind of stuff. And lifting weights, like a lot of like the kind of the American masculine version, where I only allowed myself to experience lust and rage. No sadness, no shame, no grief, no, fear, like none of that. And as you can imagine, when you can twist and contort yourself that way,
right,
it feels limiting. It feels like, there's something wrong with me. And so, when I started to sort of ask questions in my late 20s, I didn't even have like the language to talk about what was wrong, because I had succeeded. I was an investment banker. I worked in startups. I had a pretty girlfriend, a cool car. I should have been happy, right? And then I wasn't. I wasn't actually from the beginning. Like my first job out of college, working in investment banking, I was like, why do people do this?
Right.
This is stupid. So I partied really hard, and I think, as I shared before with you, that got arrested a lot, spanning 6 different states by the time I was 27, and I finally started to do my work in my late 20s.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's important to highlight, and I shared a similar experience of having that small emotional range as a teenager, and having that extend into my 20s, because there was no chance for a maturation. And instead of learning how to deal with emotions in a mature way, like the default option or my go-to was definitely numbing with alcohol or drugs, and that was just a way to deal with things that weren't on the radar, that you couldn't properly express. And I think that probably rings true, I think, with the audience of the summit, that there's just not that conversation out there, at least when we were growing up, about how to feel that range of emotions. And it even talking about feeling of a range of emotions is like, is this a safe space to talk about it?
Exactly.
All right. So I just wanted to highlight that there. But yes, take us back to your late 20s.
Yeah. So I had a really kind of interesting place to start asking questions. I was actually in business school at Columbia, New York, and took a personal development class there that just exposed me to all these ideas that I knew nothing about, like spirituality, quantum physics, the idea that you could love your job, the idea that you could actually be fulfilled and that work wasn't this 4-letter word that you did to steal from people so you could have fun on the weekends and the evenings. And so, while my colleagues and classmates went back to Wall Street and McKinsey, I went out to the San Francisco Bay Area and just threw myself into all things personal and spiritual development. Really powerful kind of first experiences were the Landmark Curriculum for Living, and then the Mankind Project's New Warrior Training. But it included everything, like hallucinogens, Burning Man, going to India, therapy, nonviolent communication, chanting, the whole, anything I can get my hands on.
Right.
And I called this 7-year period, like my wandering the desert, just like gobbling up personal and spiritual development as fast as I could, because it was like, reality's messed up, I'm messed up, I don't know, this, like, I had it in my head, there's something wrong with me.
Well, I think, and to that point, there was in the fact that you were programmed a certain way, and you were starting to realizing, oh, I've got bad code running, I need to debug. How do I debug? And I just want to highlight that I think, I started with therapy. I did coaching as a client, and then coach and training through a organization that was similar to Landmark. And I think just taking a pause there, that those are awesome starting places for people and men who do feel lost and may not feel ready to ask for help. But I think both coaching and therapy and Landmark type things are a great starting point to kind of jump off into this kind of quest about how can I dive back into myself and look at that programming.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting access to the emotions, and then kind of grieving the previous 20 years of not feeling them, and like living like a pretty small life, like not being creative, not being bold, not being courageous in an authentic way. I was courageous in stupid ways, like, drunk driving and stupid dares and tons of drugs. But actually really being courageous with your values.
I don't know if I put courageous and drunk driving in the same sentence, but maybe.
Well, what I mean is, I was reckless, but right. What we need is actually to be courageous with our values, and to right. Challenge injustice, and to be leaders and be entrepreneurial and just be fully self-expressed. That's what I mean by courageous. But I was doing it the other way,
right?
prior to this phase.
All right. So you were wandering in the desert. We've seen some early highlights. What were some of the later highlights of seeing oases and whatnot?
Well. There are pitfalls on the path, and a few I discovered. One was in Landmark. As good as it is, it can be pretty culty,
right?
As so many different personal development things. Because what happens, and I think your viewers probably have experienced this in some way, shape, or form, where folks confuse transformation with identity and community. They feel like, oh, well, I can't do therapy because I don't want to be one of those guys, or I can't right. do, personal development work because I'm not some kind of I'm not going to get a top knot and wear yoga pants. Like that's not me.
Right.
I hear this from my buddies in Chicago and New York all the time. Hey, it's not me. But it actually has nothing to do with identity. It's just a tool they're just tools to live your life better.
Right.
And so, I fell into some Landmark traps, some Mankind Project traps. And then probably the most destructive one was this kind of spiritual trap that I fell into. And that's where I basically just wanted to become spiritually enlightened. And so I'm like, if all all I need to do is like wake up, and that just means meditating and, ignoring my will, ignoring my soul, ignoring my creativity, my desire to be a dad, like ignoring all these things and just meditating. And inside of that, I basically screwed my life up really good.
Okay.
Like, told my creditors to go fuck themselves.
You're like, I'm spiritual. I don't need to be in your system, man.
Yeah, I'm not in your system. Like, enjoy your matrix. That's nice for you, but like, it's just me and God here. And I had also stopped doing my other personal development work. It was just like, just meditating. And what ended up happening was I ended up playing out some childhood wounding in my first marriage. And so I basically turned my ex-wife into my dad and like projected all this stuff that she wanted to control me and blah, 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 blah. So destroyed a marriage because I was doing this spiritual bypass, just like, just spirituality, not actually being responsible and being a grown ass man here in the real world.
Right.
So yeah, those are some highlights from the desert wandering.
All right. Interesting. And I assume, I think, what do you think brought you to that extreme? Just taking the meditation and the spirituality.
Well, I think what it was, and I experienced this a couple times, where I got so overwhelmed with how complex and magical and mysterious reality is, my own, internal landscape, that I was looking for something that wasn't in the mainstream,
right?
But that I could say, okay, well, that's messed up. I'm going to do this. And so I just kind of focused everything on just doing that one thing, because I was literally alone. Like right. My, family buddies from college, like nobody knew what I was doing, or they weren't on the same path. And I didn't really trust any other kind of teachers or gurus or anything like that. I'm like, I've got to stick to something, and this is going to be it. Okay. And I probably would have stayed there if I didn't blow up my life doing it.
You're like, maybe this isn't leading to enlightenment.
Right. Exactly.
All right. So you then find something, right? Find something that clicks.
Yeah, well, I had the good fortune after my divorce of meeting Jonathan Gustin of the Purpose Guides Institute. And he's like, well, it's clear you don't know your purpose. And I was like, well, there's no such thing, first of all. And he's like, well, okay, that's
different.
Yeah, that's a unique perspective. And you're wrong. He's like, you can be committed to upper world kind of spiritual enlightenment. You can be a grown ass man here in, the world of markets and career and politics. And you can also know your soul's purpose. They're not exclusive. And I was like, all right, here's my money. Let's do this purpose thing. And yeah, just like, take it. And I got to tell you, Ben, like hands down, that was like the most pivotal, lasting transformation I'd done. And I'd done a lot of work prior to that, landmark, meditation, men's work, all that kind of stuff. And while that stuff was like, powerful and insightful, it didn't shift my identity. It didn't like have me drop into who I really was. And so with the power of purpose work, I was like, wow, I'm not all that other stuff. I'm not my internal voices, my critic, skeptic, image consultant, wounded child, protector. There's actually something that I barely remember from childhood that's actually true. And so this work was insane. I mean, it was the most powerful I'd ever done. And soon thereafter, I got certified, and I've been guiding folks ever since 2012 to find their purpose.
Nice. I want to step back to what you were saying about who you're not when you were talking about the different characters in your head. I think it's a great point to elaborate on, because we all have those voices in our head. So can you talk a little bit about those characters and the role they play, and how that's differentiated from who we actually are?
Yeah. I'm actually going to get a visual aid here. Right. So this is Tim Kelley's book, True Purpose. Tim's awesome. He literally lives like 90 yards away from me, and he wrote the foreword to my book. But in Tim's book, I think he does the best job. If you're going to invest 45 minutes in personal development, the only 45 minutes you should spend is reading the first 2 chapters in this book.
Okay.
Because what it does, it lays out this kind of internal map. And basically, the way Tim says, you have these parts of your ego. So, Ben, you're not a cohesive Ben, I'm not a cohesive Brandon, but we have these kind of different personalities that comprise us. And what you do in purpose discovery work is you peel them apart and you look at them. So you look at your critic, this is the part that thinks you're not good enough, thinks you can't do it, thinks you failed before, you'll fail again. Your skeptic, the part that thinks it's not possible, thinks purpose is made up by, hucksters like me and you, and like.
You're just trying to make a buck, man.
Yeah, just trying to make a buck. Right, exactly. So the skeptic basically doubts the whole enterprise. You have your risk manager who doesn't want to lose everything he's already built. So he doesn't want to lose his career, his reputation, his wife, his money. You have your image consultant, and that's the one that doesn't want to look like a dork. That doesn't want to look, that doesn't want the top knot in the yoga pants. That doesn't want people to think he's weird. And then you have your wounded child, and that's the part that is most close to your wounds from childhood.
Right.
And this part really wants to avoid. So this is the part that numbs out, that avoids conflict, discomfort. And so we all have these parts, but until we do the work, they just kind of exist as this tangled web of voices. And so with Tim's work, you peel them off one at a time and you interview them, you find their origin story, what they want from you, what role they want to play in your life after you find your purpose, and you actually get their permission. So you actually do dialogue with each of these parts and get their permission to let you find and live your purpose. So once that space is cleared, then you do this kind of higher purpose work. You actually do a number of soul encounter or direct access methods where you're actually revealing your purpose. For some folks, it'll be their very first time ever connecting with this part of who they are. Right. And then the end, putting Humpty Dumpty back together. So taking all of these ego parts and then upgrading them with the new Purpose OS. And so then you have this kind of internally aligned psyche, and then you take that psyche and you start to reformat all the areas of your life. So your health, your relationships, family, career, community, finances, spirituality, etc. And that's what, gets you that lasting transformation where you're just sitting there inside your purpose.
So if you were to take a guy who hasn't done this type of work before, would you give him prerequisites to this purpose work, or do you think one can go straight into this work?
With rare exception, I would say purpose work is not the most important thing for a man to start with. And I say that because I actually have met people who are really self-aware. They've either been immersed in kind of self-aware cultures, or they're artists, or they're teachers, and they really get their internal landscape because they've been studying, the internal landscape of kids or something like that.
Right.
But most men first need to get this. Again, this is just my opinion. I'm not the purpose pope. Other people might tell you other things. But my opinion is that you have to have access to all your emotions, because the imaginal realm, the part that actually knows your purpose, and your creativity and your emotions are all bound up together. And if you have a bunch of pain and insecurities and shame from your childhood that you haven't looked at, odds are you kind of cut off that ability to feel, and also cut off the ability to receive your soul's purpose. So I personally recommend, if folks' lives are in a mess, go do the landmark work, get empowered, and start cleaning your life up, get out of debt, get a job, stop beating your wife, that whole thing.
In other words, get to a baseline.
Yeah. Get to a baseline. But if you're already pretty stable and there's not a lot of dysfunction, there's just not a lot of aliveness, I would say do the Mankind Project's New Warrior Training Adventure. That's like the fastest way to hit it hard. I mean, therapy is great, but it usually takes months, if not years, to actually get to a place of that. Whereas with MKP, I think you can like hit it really hard in just one weekend.
Right.
And then, you keep doing the work thereafter. But basically, once men have access, then they can start to do the real searching, because they've allowed themselves to fully experience who they are.
Right. So just to kind of feedback what you're saying, one has to do that initial work, and you suggest the Mankind Project or Landmark is a great place to start. Then they can feel their emotions, get rid of some blocks, and then once those blocks are gone, then they can be a little bit more receptive to the more subtle and powerful signals that are within them that otherwise, you couldn't tune into.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the way to think about it is like, if you haven't done any personal work, basically there's a lot of pain, and the pain needs to be felt and dealt with. It's really hard to create from pain. I mean, other than
that doesn't sound enjoyable. Why would I want to do that, Brandon?
Yeah. Well, it is scary. It's scary because, but if you trust the process, trust something like the Mankind Project, they've done this for 60,000 men. If you trust the process and people on the other side of it say it's worth it, then you go do it. And you go through it, but then on the other side is like this massive vista. Like, there's self-love, there's excitement, there's, full self-expression, there's integrity, authenticity. I mean, there's all that stuff's on the other side of moving into those kind of dark spaces. So, I would say that, that it helps to do that first. And then you can really do the deeper soul work and find out, well, now what is yours to give? Like, what is your impact?
Right. Yeah. And I think to echo that sentiment, having done that work, it's like there's a huge cloud and a weight on your shoulders prior to kind of shining a light on the shadows. And once you kind of are able to express those shadows, some of those, deepest things that you normally don't tell anybody, and you have somebody who's wise guide you through how to express that. It's an incredible cathartic release, and it allows you to let go and just open up so much more space, and like open up that bandwidth for better experience, rather than keeping it small because you're trying to protect what's inside.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I just want to share with your viewers, or listeners, no matter how bad you think you are, you're not bad. Meaning, like, I've done this work, men's work, with Nazis, murderers, rapists, people who've been raped, people who've raped kids. I mean, like, we all responded to our wounds from childhood differently. And so if there's if there's shame to be felt, that's fine. But just know that it's, like, there's nobody that's beyond doing this work that is like too damaged or too messed up, or their past is too checkered to step into their fullness. Yeah,
I think a cool example of that, and I was looking into recently, was John Joseph of the Cro-Mags. He was a guy who, they're a famous punk band, and he's now like a pretty, he's a triathlete. He's a fired up vegan, and he went through foster homes, went through drug dealing, and has reinvented himself. And it's through that work that you can do that. And by not doing it, you kind of stay in the same zone. So it's like you either accept sequestering the pain and keeping it there, or you deal with the short-term burst of pain and be able to release it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like anything else. It's like going to the gym. It's anything that requires willpower. I mean, you got to sacrifice in order to receive.
Nice. So back to the purpose work, you've got these voices, you've got these exercises that get you in touch with your intuition to let you know where you're at. Do people totally change their lives once they figure out their purpose, or do they make incremental changes? What does that look like?
It depends how much they have going on. So like when I do this work with executives, which is most of my work, they've got years, if not decades, of stuff that has been built on their previous ego or on the previous identity. So you don't just want to blow it up or try to blow it up like I did in my 20s, right? You want to actually kind of, find, your purpose will actually tell you what to do next. And they'll say, okay, well, you've got to upgrade your health. You've got to take on becoming a great husband. You've got to take on some training and then come back for more instruction. And so it's like, it's on the other side, it's usually like much more kind of subtle and gradual. Now that said, like I've seen people who didn't have a lot of those tethers completely change their lives. Like start the process in one career, and by the time the process is over, they've already begun their next career. Like that happens. Or they, drop their partner, or they, they just get clear. They're like, I can't live in this house anymore. This house is not good for my purpose. And so some folks like just start making, changes rapidly. But most, they say, okay, well, I see now where my life is going. And with that comes a lot of self-acceptance, comes a lot of just, oh, okay, this is just the life I have. This is where I have to begin. It's not like my life is wrong. It's just like, this is where I'm beginning.
Right.
And then, pick off the low hanging fruit, and eventually your life looks totally different 18 months from now.
Right. And I think that's important to highlight too, that once you find this, purpose, it's not necessarily you're going to drop everything and move into it. It's a trust in your intuition that what's best for you next, and that there's several missions in there that you need to accomplish, as opposed to, I need to become the Dalai Lama now, or Mother Teresa, and just forsake everything to meditate on a mountain all day.
Yeah. It rarely happens that way, although it does. Like there are oil executives who are now monks, and they did it quickly. There's arms dealers who are now monks. I mean, it can happen.
Right.
I guess in that case, you're like, well, I'm not going to go back to work as an arms dealer. Excuse me.
Fair enough. Tactically, on a day-to-day level, any practices, like meditation or other things that you recommend on a more subtle scale, if people aren't ready to go into a program or anything like that you found have helped level you up?
Yeah, I could share all sorts of practices. What I do as a maintenance is just I meditate and I pray every morning, and not necessarily to God per se, but it's more like surrendering to my purpose, to my mission, like asking for strength, asking for clarity, asking for compassion for myself and the people that I'm serving. But if folks are fresh into the path, two things I want to recommend. One is, you got to have some kind of personal quiet time. Like just if it's only for 5 minutes, as soon as you do it, it'll be your favorite 5 minutes of the day. Just like no distractions, just turn the phone off, go sit outside, stare at a tree for 5 minutes, like whatever it is. And in that space, I'm just like, oh, I like being me, or like,
right.
I don't have to do anything. And the other thing is creativity. So, for men who haven't, begun much inner work, a great access point is to start playing music again, is to start drawing again, is to start, whatever your mediums were from childhood, go pick up some color, go pick up some clay, go pick up some, hammer and nail, like start making stuff again. Cause that's like, that's going to connect you to like, these kind of flow experiences and like what it's like to actually be you. And then you'll have the experience that now you have something at stake. and you can actually feel this way when you're doing more than, you know, playing the guitar, or doing more than building chairs. You can actually have it in your life, and then you'll begin to want to do more work so you can, you know, feel that state of flow more often.
Yep. 2018, one of my resolutions is to do more of the drawing and painting. I did an experiment last year and did find that flow in a painting I did, and you know, wrote a blog post about it, and then didn't do it anymore, even though I enjoyed it. So I need to take some of that medicine, and I can attest to its power, and it's great being in flow. It's great taking those risks, even when they're really low. You're like, oh, what if nobody likes it? And you're just like, okay, let me get over this stupid, you know, those voices, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. For Christmas, my fiance and my mom got me 8 guitar lessons, which I'm really excited about, because I've been telling myself I'm going to pick the guitar back up for 20 years, and I haven't done it because I'm like, oh, you know, I remember my fingers hurting and blah blah blah, all my reasons, and then they did. Now I'm like, yay, it's happening! Like I was so excited to start going to classes, and you know, that might be something that you know, make some kind of significant investment, not like necessarily in a new thing, but like in a set of experiences that's going to move you deeper into your creativity. Like sign up for an art class, sign up for a guitar class, whatever it is, so that, you know, you spent the money. If you don't do it, you're a damn fool, you know?
Yeah. No, I had a lot of fun for a couple of years doing improv classes, and improv classes are a great way to get out of your head and just spend a lot of time laughing. And that's some great therapy in itself.
Yeah. Improv is huge. Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. Cool. All right. I want to segue into, you know, we talked before about your mission and your purpose and building a movement. So I kind of want to talk about that a little bit as you are recruiting members of your Purpose Brigade. So talk a little bit about your mission, and for those who are so involved, how they can learn more.
Yeah. So my near-term mission is to bring online purpose discovery work to 2 million people by the end of 2020. And I would say in total, where we're at right now is like maybe 50,000 people have gone through purpose courses. I mean, it's still a super tiny segment of humanity. And so what I'm trying to do is make as much noise as possible. So we've assembled this group of like over 80 people who are doing this work, and we're writing articles, we're doing summits together, we're creating conferences, writing books. Last year we did this book called Purpose Rising, which was about 20 people who are leaders in the space, like contributed some perspective on purpose. And then early this year, so in just a month or two, my book, Planet on Purpose, will come out. And that's really what I try to kind of holistically say, okay, what this thing is. So Tim Kelley, as I mentioned, who wrote True Purpose, he said my book was the most comprehensive book on purpose ever written. And that means a lot to me. And but basically what we look at is what purpose is, like from all these different perspectives, and actually how it works in your life, and all the science behind it. So most men are pretty kind of show me the science, show me the facts. Like, I'm not going to listen to some guy with a ponytail.
Need the data, bro.
Yeah, that's right. Need the data. Show me the data. And so it's just this kind of overwhelming show of force of like, purpose creates. It's correlated with higher levels of income, wealth. You're 50% more likely to be a leader, 64% more likely to be fulfilled. You're 4 times as likely to be engaged at work. You're 500% more productive when you're in states of flow than when you're not. You have longer tenure, 20%. And so it's like career, which is a big purpose concern for men. Like, you'd be a damn fool to know your purpose if you want to be successful, right? It also is great for dating. So there's studies that say, your purpose, you're regarded as more attractive And I don't know actually know how they. I mean, you can find all these scientific studies on scienceofpurpose.org. And they found that when people are in relationships and they know their purpose, they experience love 31% more of the time. And then there's all these impacts in health. You know, you live longer, you've got better cognition, better memory, you're smarter. So I basically just try to kind of hit people in the face as much as possible with the science.
Yeah, no, I like the dating hook on it. I think there's a mini e-course right there to hook people in.
Absolutely. And then it basically brings people into a vision for what our species could look like when we all know our purpose. So we'd be doing things a lot differently. You know, if you think about how we spend our time now as humans, you know, after we pay for our rent and our food, we're basically filling this purpose-sized hole with all this crap that's not purpose. So it's, you know, it's fantasy football, it's video games, it's drinking, it's, you know, jerking off. It's all this stuff that's trying to like keep us not finding purpose. And so when you actually fill that hole and you actually know your purpose, you're not trying to actually, you know, take other experiences to fill the hole, because the hole's not there anymore. So all you have now is a vision, and you've got a craft and a mission. Now you're serving. And this is where like you get to make your highest contribution, be creative, have an impact, you know, realize all those, you know, leadership, wealth, income, all that kind of stuff. But then, like, you know, how do we cooperate as a species if we don't need to like numb ourselves every day, if we don't need to sell each other things we don't really need? So we've got a totally different political economy if people know their purpose. So that's what the back half of my book looks at, is what kind of culture and political economy we will have when everyone knows their purpose.
It's a fantastic mission to strive for, and I want us to get there.
We will. We're gonna get there.
The world will be such a better place if we can stop being little distracted social media, cell phone bots.
Yep.
I'm ready to get out of that. Cool. All right. So anything else before we wrap up here?
Well, I just want to reiterate: go do the New Warrior training. Go do Landmark. You know, $750 for a weekend that'll change your life. Both of those. And then if you then feel ready to do purpose work, you can visit my website. There's a bunch of free exercises. There's the audio version of my book. You can listen to the first 6 chapters for free. And so, yeah, if you go to Ensouled Life, that's ENSOULED.life.
We'll have a link.
Yeah. You post a link, and you can learn more about what purpose is and how you find it. Awesome.
Well, really appreciate your time, your knowledge, and sharing your purpose with us. It was a lot of fun, and grateful for it.